Hi, good morning. How's everyone? I'm happy to be this morning speaking about something that for me was a big question when I started being a lawyer specialized on Bitcoin regulation. The first question I asked myself was why Bitcoin should be regulated, right? That was like the first thing that came to my mind, understanding Bitcoin from the past. I started around 2017, so before the Bitcoin law was in El Salvador. So when it comes to the Bitcoin law, the first thing that I thought was that, right? So at the beginning, everyone was thinking, why it should be a Bitcoin law, right? The laws around Bitcoin are given in the protocol, so why should be a law? So that started to be first thoughts on the first, let's say, 4 months. But once you start understanding that when a government decides that Bitcoin is legal tender, there are some things that need regulation. That doesn't mean you are regulating Bitcoin, right? It means there are some transactions or some activities, economic activities, that need some type of regulation. So this morning I will try to explain what does it mean to become a Bitcoin company in El Salvador, what's the rules to play that game in this country, and I called it sound regulations because I think that even when Bitcoin law is very simple, we have a relevant regulatory ecosystem that has been designed in a good way. So it's relevant because the world is looking at El Salvador and companies are trying to operate from El Salvador to the world, and that's possible, and it's relevant to understand those rules because once you get them, you can benefit from having your company in El Salvador, but also from the markets, the international markets that require regulated conditions and certainty for operators, right? So basically, we're going to talk about that. And why should a country adopt regulations around Bitcoin? Well, basically, Bitcoin law sets a couple of rules regarding what's most important around economic transactions around Bitcoin. So it's not related to becoming a regulated economic asset, right? Because Bitcoin, again, has its own rule. It's related to the economic agents that play around that economic ecosystem, right? So a government, you cannot blame a government for being a government. A government sets the rules, also requires taxes for citizens to live and obtain whatever benefits we can obtain from the government. I'm not saying that Bitcoin will basically move the whole Salvadoran economy from one day to the other, but it can't move it from, let's say, 5 years or 10 from now. So in order for this to happen, some rules need to be deployed, right? So why in El Salvador, and why to adopt a ground zero opportunity from the Bitcoin perspective? So basically, sound money needs sound regulation, right? So this is not forbidding regulation. I call it enabling regulation. You're not playing in a country where Bitcoin is forbidden. You're playing on a country where Bitcoin is legal tender, which basically means that according to Bitcoin law, right, you can basically adopt any type of transaction. When I say any type of transactions, is every type of transaction. Economic agents can pay obligations, acquire obligations using Bitcoin, every type of obligation. Since it's legal tender, which means it's money. And treatment as money, well, it's not necessarily just a benefit to be able basically to transact using Bitcoin, but also to have a certainty on how to become a Bitcoin company. So how does it work? Basically, Bitcoin law sets rules for 4 types of operators. This means wallets, payment processors, exchanges, custodians, and some other type of added value services on Bitcoin chain, such as miners, for example. you can think of other type of added value services, but these are the 4 main categories that Bitcoin law and secondary rules set. Why? Well, if you use Bitcoin, you know you need a wallet, right? Sometimes you will need an exchange. Sometimes you will use a custodian wallet. I don't like them, but some people do. And also, sometimes you will need OTC transactions, right? So playing on the Bitcoin economy has very certain parameters that are not complicated, right? Bitcoin is pretty simple. So as it is, this law only has 13 articles, right? So it's not complex, and I think it should be that way. But then, when you're a Bitcoin company, right, the game changes. Because if you're going to be transacting for a ton of people around the globe and you're basically earning from that, right, at least you should pay a couple of taxes wherever you are operating. Otherwise, well, people in countries like ours won't benefit about it, right? Other may, but we should benefit too. So some of that money should stay in the country, and that's why Bitcoin companies pay taxes. This is relevant to understand at the beginning, because there was a lot of confusion at the beginning for people who thought that coming to the country was completely tax-free and that you will get your residence on the next day. Doesn't work that way, but we do have certain rules and specific regulation for shareholding investors, not necessarily only on Bitcoin companies, also for other companies. So how does it work? Once you set up a Bitcoin company, the only thing you get is 0% taxes on capital gains, which is relevant on the Bitcoin ecosystem, right? It's the only tax that you don't pay. But well, also, you need to be a company compliant around AML regulations, right? This is pretty standard around the world, but in El Salvador, we use a standard called GAFI, which is used in basically whole Latin America for anti-money laundering activities, so KYC, due diligence, proof of identity, etc. So all these things, as a Bitcoin company, you have to comply, right? It's mandatory. Also, what's important is the law creates what we call the Bitcoin Service Provider Registry. This is a public registry. It's not a license. I have to clarify this because you will see some other lawyers saying that you will get a Bitcoin license. That's not a license. It's a registry. Why it's not a license? Because Bitcoin in the country is money, such as US dollar. So why would you need a license to use your legal tender, right? You don't. There's a difference between the Bitcoin law and being registered as a Bitcoin service provider. And also we have the digital asset law. So what's a digital asset? In El Salvador, in February, basically the government approved a second important law, which, from my perspective, gives clarity on a lot of transactions that basically were not forbidden in El Salvador, but weren't regulated. We know now that you can build also digital assets on Bitcoin. So everything that is not pure Bitcoin is considered a digital asset, right? Non-Bitcoin activities are considered digital asset activities. So economic agents around digital asset activities, you can name here stable coins, you can name here whatever type of token you like. I don't, but every other type of digital asset, as our law calls it, is regulated, and you cannot operate under free conditions, because for this one, you need a license, basically. So the digital asset law creates the National Commission for Digital Assets, which is something similar to SEC in the US, but the difference is that this one is an enabling authority, right? It's not there to forbid activities, it's there to basically give you clarity on how to become also a digital asset service provider. Here you can think of figures such as trust funds, any type of investment vehicle, even Bitcoin banks or Bitcoin trust funds, we've seen this type of interest from clients, and that is not regulated on Bitcoin law. That's regulated on the digital asset law, and you need a license to do it, all right? So once you get this, and also you need to be AML compliant, right? You need to be AML compliant in every sense of the word. Once you get this license as a digital asset service provider, you can do different activities, such as, for example, issue digital assets, publicly or privately. These offerings are basically considered private if you do them for less than 50 people only, and these people should be qualified investors. What does that mean? A qualified investor in Salvadorian regulation means you need to have at least $500,000 in investable assets without taking into account your place of residence. So this is important because depending on the type of business that you are, you may be interested on both laws, right? Bitcoin law and digital assets law, or only one. It will depend on your business model. And well, once you basically understand where you fit in which category of this regulation, you need to also get approvals, additional approvals and certifications. For example, if you want to build some digital asset on chain, on Bitcoin, let's say, let's think of using Liquid to build whatever digital asset on Bitcoin, you would, one is obtaining your digital asset license, but the second thing is you will need to go to a certifier, which is a third party, objective third party, which has been authorized by the National Commission of Digital Assets before the National Commission of Digital Assets approves that public or private offering. Private offering, less than 50 people, public offering to the masses, right? So commercializing everywhere you want in the world. In order to do it, you need to build what we call under the law the document for relevant information, which could be something similar as a white paper, but it's not because it has a lot of details related to financials, to cybersecurity, to compliance. And if you're familiar with ETFs, well, it's very similar to building a prospectus on ETF level. So it's not easy to obtain this approval. But the conditions are given, and the regulation has every step in order to get it, right? So it's important for me that you understand these two big regulations so you can think where your business model fits, right? Why? Because this one is really beneficial related to taxes, right? Bitcoin law, it's only for capital gains, but let's say you're a Bitcoin company building digital assets on Bitcoin, you can go on the digital assets law and you will be benefited from this awesome tax regimen, which literally saves you 42% of taxes. So 0 income tax, withholding tax, VAT, then municipal tax, shareholder dividend tax, which you don't get that in many jurisdictions. Also 0 import tax. For example, let's say you're a miner. You want to bring, I don't know, a super new equipment to mine with renewable energy, for example. You can import that equipment tax-free. So that can make you competitive, right, for your clients, give better prices as well. And finally, digital assets are also 0 capital gains tax-free. All right, so these are the two important regulations, right? But as we know, the ecosystem also has developers, right? Technology companies that are not necessarily wallets or exchanges or, you know, the builders, right? The guys who basically are behind the back end of everything we use, but they're not the business, right? They are the builders. So for them, there is a third regulation, which is basically different because it wasn't designed to economic transactions on Bitcoin or digital assets, calling them as financial transactions. This law was basically designed to attract other type of technologists, right? So software development could be Bitcoin software developers, of course, because Bitcoin is technology, right? So if you're a Bitcoiner and you're also a developer, but you're not a wallet, you're not on digital assets, but you build stuff, you can also set up a company in El Salvador and have really great benefits. But there are specific technologies benefited, not every technology, right? So the most relevant are cloud computing, AI, big data, quantum computing. Any quantum computer guy here? No, not yet. So well, I know it's hard to get there, but maybe someday, right? And also you have manufacturing, right? So for hardware companies, if you build whatever type of hardware, then you can import those pieces, set up your shop here in El Salvador, and you will be benefited from a very interesting regiment as well. R&D, that's a super wide category. So the law is welcoming people like researchers, technicians, people who are true academic guys who will help develop this type of technologies in the country. They are also welcome under the innovation and manufacturing technology law. So what's the difference between these benefits and the digital asset law? Well, you don't need a license here. You're a technology company, so you don't need a license, right? You don't get the VAT tax-free, and basically you don't get the shareholding tax-free. But the rest is basically the same. And you have 15 years. So different from digital assets law, where you don't get 15 certain years, right? Because the National Commission of Digital Assets and also, let's say, the Central Bank of Reserve for Bitcoin companies will be supervising you every 3, 6, and yearly periods of time where you will have to be compliant. Otherwise, they can take your license. If you're a technology company, well, your life will be a little bit easier, right? But you will get certainty for 15 years. So companies basically can combine these regulations. Sometimes you will have sister companies, sometimes only one, depending on your business model. If you have other holding companies in other jurisdictions, you can also benefit from that. And basically, set up your corporate structure in the best way. It's super easy. I won't bore you with this, but simple stuff, getting your tax ID as individuals, because it doesn't mean you will pay taxes as an individual. It's just an ID, right? It's a requirement on our regulations. We are improving the regulation, but we are still, building upon the way. So you still need to get a tax ID, but this is super quick, like you get it in 2 hours, and doesn't mean you have to pay taxes. The tax number is for the company, not for your individual quality, right? And then if you can travel, well, at least you need 2 shareholders. We don't have one single entity shareholding structure, so you need at least 2. And then the rest of stuff related to, well, opening bank accounts, the licenses, and depending if you need the AML program or you're going for the innovation and manufacturing law, which is different, right? So if you want to stop by our booth, we have a booth down to the hall, right? This is the team. This is Eva and Marce. They will be there. I'm going to be there all day as well if you want to have a conversation, slowly, and we can meet as well. Our office is just crossing the street on the World Trade Center. And we consider ourselves legal engineers because we feel more a technologist than a traditional lawyer. We are not traditional lawyers. We think Bitcoin ecosystem doesn't need traditional lawyers. They make life very hard. So we understand the industry. We understand transactions on Bitcoin and digital assets. We also understand the technology. So having a conversation with us is different than if you will try to explain to a traditional lawyer what's Bitcoin. So you're happy to scan that as well, so you can check us out. And if you also want to contact us, you can scan that one, or just write an email to my jose@legalitica.com, and I'll be more than happy to help. So I'm going to let the last 5 minutes for questions, comments, or anything you'd like to do conversation. Yeah. There's a question over there.
Question about just confirming is because VAT is kind of sometimes different from sales tax. So for example, if you have a wallet, you help the merchant to pay, just collect the fees, but also like the merchant will pay you like 5% fee. Do you pay like sales tax on that? And the follow-up question is another scenario for Lightning nodes. Sometimes you are just doing routing, but you charge a small fees, and you don't know who's the location of the previous node and the next peer. And the third one is that for if you run exchange here, you help people to convert US dollar to Bitcoin and Bitcoin to US dollar. What's the sales tax on this kind of 3 transactions?
So well, again, this is something that at the moment it's not necessarily beneficial. I think Bitcoin regulations should be reviewed, because at the moment you will have to pay sales tax, basically. As a traditional company, since it's money, right? So in El Salvador. So if you are regulated in El Salvador, for every transaction coming from a wallet, if you're the owner of the wallet company, payment processors as well, exchanges or OTCs, even custodians, you have to pay taxes. So basically, traditional tax here is income tax is 25 to 30% a year, 13% VAT, and then you have what we call here like anticipation of the income tax, which is a monthly percentage of the whole 25% a year, which is around 1.25%. Not necessarily an accountant, but you know, those are the general rules for taxes. So yeah, the answer is you'll have to pay. The tax retention?
No, the sales tax.
Sales tax would be like VAT, right?
In some countries, not really equivalent, because VAT means value added. So it's really, it's like you can deduct some of the other fees and pay to other like service and data.
So here, the basic rule is every price should have what we call VAT. We don't have like a specific sales tax. It's VAT, right? So it's 13%, and you can deduct that one if you are a contributor of taxes. So you can deduct the 13%, but if you're not, basically your invoices should include the 13% VAT. That's how it works. Any other question? Yeah? Can you please, the microphone?
Required to pay sales tax? Service?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. But depending on your operation, right? Depending on your operation, you can go, for example, on innovation and manufacturing law for, let's say, consultancy, technology consultancy services. And then even if you pay sales taxes, you won't pay all the others, right? So that's why you benefit. So in the end, you're having a 35% tax efficiency on this side of the story. So, you know, it's a balance around that one. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned that there's a registry for Bitcoin companies. Is that public? Is there a list that the government provides so we can see what companies are moving here, who's growing, and like how big the ecosystem is?
Yeah, you can find that at the Central Bank of Reserve website, which is the entity that holds the Bitcoin service providers registry, and it's public. The same for digital asset companies. There's a website for the National Commission of Digital Assets, and there's the public registry for digital asset service providers. It's completely public, and you can verify it. Once you obtain that one, you will get a certificate as a Bitcoin service provider from the Central Bank of Reserve. and also from the National Commission of Digital Assets. I think time is over, so I don't know if there's any other question. Otherwise, thanks a lot. Oh yeah.
I just wanted to ask if manufacturers of medical technology are included in this law.
Yes, I mean, you have to sell the story, right? This one depends from the Ministry of Economics. So if you are a company manufacturing med tech, like any type of hardware for medical technology, I would say you can qualify, right? Also, you can sell it as research and development. So I would say, yeah, it does. All right, so thank you guys. Enjoy the conference.